Hello everypony, I'm Critical Thought and welcome to my review of Bats. This episode comes to us from Merriwether Williams, or as I like to call her, the female Dave Polsky. Just like him, her track record consists of flop after flop after flop, at least in my opinion. However, this Season 4 episode, which is primarily centered around Fluttershy and Applejack, would be her last that she would ever contribute to the series. Will Miss Williams go out with a bang, or with a whimper? Let's find out. We kick off this episode, no pun intended, at Sweet Apple Acres with Applejack eagerly awaiting the sunrise to commence apple bucking day and the start of the apple harvesting season. This episode definitely takes AJ's love of apples and cranks it up to extremely comedic levels. One thing I actually hadn't noticed before this review, though, was how in this shot where she's watching the apples fall around her, her pupils as well as the glints in her eyes are actually in the shape of apples. Way to literally interpret the apple of my eye joke, Miss Williams. It really ties the shot together. However, AJ's bliss is ruined when she notices that all the apples falling down are rotten and have turned to mush, realizing the culprit almost instantly. Theme: Applejack calls her friends to Sweet Apple Acres and tells them that fruit bats have returned to terrorize the farm. Twilight gives us a pretty good callback to Apple Family Reunion here, while simultaneously addressing a question brought up by that episode. When she says to AJ that she thought the fruit bats were contained to the West Orchard, AJ tells her that these aren't the same fruit bats. These are vampire fruit bats. She's especially worried about the bats because she has been nurturing a giant apple that's the size of 3 ponies side to side and 1.5 ponies tall that she plans to enter into the ASUS State Fair produce competition. Fluttershy, being the go-to pony for animal problems, decides to ask the vampire fruit bats to leave the apple alone, but she's unsuccessful. AJ says they need to get the bats to leave the orchard, calling them pests, vermin, and monsters. This upsets Fluttershy, who believes it's wrong to vilify the animals in such a way for simply doing what they normally do to survive. This leads into a fantastic Danny Elfman-inspired musical number by Daniel Ingram entitled Stop the Bats. In this song, Applejack and Fluttershy debate their points of view back and forth to each other. Applejack wants the bats gone for all the damage they are doing to her crop, but Fluttershy defends the bats, saying that not only are they just trying to provide for their family, but their presence will help the orchard in the long run as they will spread more seeds that will grow into new trees. Since I have so little to say about the song itself, since it's just plain old amazing and I love it, let me talk a little bit about everything else going on here. First off, the visuals really aid the storytelling. I love how they dull the colors for all of AJ's lines and overexpose them for Flutter's lines to further contrast their points of view. Also, I realized while listening to this song that this conflict expressed here can serve as a perfect allegory for the politics surrounding illegal immigration, and it blew my freaking mind. If the bats represent illegal immigrants, which they are in the context of the episode since they invaded Sweet Apple Acres without permission, Applejack is the voice of conservative America, while Fluttershy shares a more liberal mentality. Applejack represents conservatives in this exchange because she sees these bats, these illegal immigrants, as dangerous to her way of life, and therefore need to leave her home. Meanwhile, Fluttershy shares a liberal take on the subject and advocates that they are simply trying to provide a safe life for their families, and that they will actually help boost the economy, represented by the Apple family's apple business. When you keep this allegory in mind, it definitely adds more weight to the moral at the end of the episode.
Well, I for one don't have a doubt. These vermin must be stamped right out. I second that they've got to go. These bats, they've got to hit the road. It comes down to just one simple fact. They've crossed the line, it's time to fight them back. Stop the bats, make them go and not come back. Stop the bats, make them go and not come back. Stop the bats, make them go and not come back. Yes, it comes down to just one simple fact. They've crossed the line, it's time that we attack.
Also, now that I can't unsee this obvious metaphor, it makes the fact that the rest of the main 6 agree with Applejack and disagree with Fluttershy kind of jarring and out of character. I don't doubt that amongst the main 6, political partisanship is present, but making it so lopsidedly right-wing doesn't make sense to me. I can see the likes of Rainbow Dash and Rarity taking the side of Applejack, but for Twilight and Pinkie to do the same instead of siding with Fluttershy, I don't know how much I buy that. Well, actually, I take that back. While Twilight does initially side with AJ, she ultimately ends up taking a more moderate-level approach to the problem, suggesting that they try to find a way to get the vampire fruit bats to not eat the apples that doesn't involve them needing to be kicked out of Sweet Apple Acres. This does seem more in character for her, at least. Twilight eventually finds a solution in the form of a spell, go figure, but she needs the bats' full attention to pull it off. So she asks Fluttershy to do her stare on them. Fluttershy declines at first, saying she feels like it's morally wrong to do it when it's not an emergency, but Twi ends up convincing her that not doing it would be equally wrong, so she agrees to help. This reference to Ridley Scott's Alien film is definitely one of my absolute favorites of this entire season. So the main six round up the bats to a single tree, and Flutters performs her stare, while Twilight casts the spell on the bats. At first, the spell looks like it effectively solved the problem, but we are teased with the idea that something went wrong when Fluttershy smells a nearby apple, becoming entranced by it for a few seconds. The next day, Applejack attempts to commence apple bucking day again, but still finds her crop ruined. The main six think the spell didn't work, but when Dashi tries to offer an apple to the bats, they are uninterested. The main six reach the conclusion that something else must be ruining the apples, so they devise a plan for a stakeout to catch the culprit later that night in the act. Fluttershy attempts to get the stakeout called off, saying she's hungry while salivating at a nearby apple, but the stakeout continues as planned. Each of the girls is given a light signal to shoot into the sky when they see something suspicious, and they all split up. After a little while of searching, Applejack shines her signal into the sky, and the main six converge on it, shocked at what they see. Yes, Fluttershy has transformed into a vampire bat pony, or as Rarity calls her, Flutterbat. And she has been responsible for destroying the apples since Twi cast her spell. As a vampire bat pony, Fluttershy has lost her sentience, and just acts on her animal instincts. Twilight soon realizes that what must have happened is her spell didn't so much stop the vampire fruit bats from wanting the apples, as it just transferred their hunger into Fluttershy.
If she keeps this up, your whole crop will be gone in no time.
That's the least of my worries. I just want my friend back.
Keeping in mind the allegory from earlier, this makes this already emotional line pack 10 times harder of a punch. This shows that true friendship can transcend political differences. I admit I do struggle with integrating differing political views into my friendships, but I know that's just my problem to work on, and I'm glad the episode brought this up. Twilight realizes that she needs to perform a reversing spell on Flutterbat, but the main five have a hard time catching her. Pinkie Pie admits it would be a whole lot easier if they could just get Fluttershy to use the stare on Flutterbat, which gives Twi an idea. Applejack then sacrifices her prize apple to lure in her friend, but just as she is about to attack the apple, it's kicked out of the way to reveal a mirror, causing Flutterbat to give herself the stare. This lets Twilight keep her still long enough to cast her reversing spell, and Fluttershy returns to normal. The next day, we get not one, not two, but 3 morals. The first moral is AJ realizing the importance of compromise and taking Fluttershy's suggestion from earlier, giving the bats a section of the orchard to call their home, where they will spread more seeds that will grow into even more apple trees. She also includes in the friendship journal that being short-sighted about problems can lead to short-term solutions. Fluttershy then adds that you shouldn't let anyone, not even your best friends, pressure you into doing something that you find morally wrong. Damn, Miss Williams, 3 morals in 1 episode? That's an Academy record! Finally, we close out this episode with a perfect little teaser of a potential return of Flutterbat. So, what did I think of bats? I think Miss Williams has finally broken the curse because I absolutely love this episode. Even more than I initially did upon my first viewing, thanks to recognizing that incredibly important metaphor upon doing this review. I like how it gives both sides of the argument their time to express their views and doesn't demonize either side in the process. It's incredibly difficult for a writer to not seep their own political biases into the script, so I commend Miss Williams for remaining so impartial here. Flutterbat was also really well designed, as it managed to turn one of the cutest ponies in the show into something that instills serious fear. The same can also be said for the art direction during the night scenes at Sweet Apple Acres, too. The song is definitely among some of my favorite in the show's history, and finding a way to tell such a deep and thought-provoking story while also making it entertaining and cramming in a whopping 3 morals to boot is a monumental achievement. This is why I'm giving Bats a rewatch it rating. It's not one of my top 10 favorite episodes of all time, but it comes pretty damn close, and it's absolutely a gem of Season 4. As always, I am Critical Thought, and I will see you all in my next video. Never stop thinking critically.
I